Okay, I'm starting the recording, and Marty, I think you can start facilitating.
Super. Do we think everybody's here that's coming? I only saw a few people jump off as she was finishing up. So, we've got 15 minutes. I know many of you know each other. I know many of you. Looks like a lot of familiar faces or folks that I've met. I think we're going to dispense with the introductions and all that. And I'm just wondering if folks have pressing questions that weren't answered. I know I'm very interested in kind of, having people talk about, boy, this looks a lot like Region 4, and your reaction to this is what the states and the feds down there came up with. How true does that ring with your folks on who needs help and what kind of help they need? And so I guess, first, if there's any questions about what's in those tools, that's fine. But I'd really like to get to that second question if anybody wants to go first. Or I could pick on someone. I could pick on my friends from Indiana because I've had a lot of conversations with your state recycling organization down there and a little bit with IDEM. But I'm curious I think you guys have some understanding of the tools and have watched some of that. Any thoughts from anybody from that delegation?
I was going to let Tom take this, and I do have one comment after he's done. But
sure.
Don't hate me forever. Thank you.
Yeah. There's some good expertise that goes with that tool. It's very valuable to discern between different types of programs and types of infrastructure even. But it comes back to the local communities having the expertise to get to that discussion point. And it takes staffing, resources, and funding just to get to a level where we can discuss different types of programs to be implemented and being able to follow through on that. The type of questions are very good.
I think this is a useful tool. I think that where Tom is leading to with us at least is we're somewhat, at least our state, separated from the communities and providing technical assistance directly to the communities. So we don't have that staff and resources currently to talk to the right people at the communities that would be able to work together to work through this kind of toolkit. I think that this would be valuable to share with our solid waste management districts that do work more closely in each county with their communities. So yeah, the data is good, the tool is good. Implementation on our end is that where I see some challenges.
So you're actually going exactly where this tool was designed to be built, and really that's where that third piece was make the case is how can we create somewhat of a framework, some of that intellectual knowledge about all the things that go into it, and then how can we make that convenient for people to spread that out. We've got one scheduled. We've taken more of a train the trainer approach in the past to say, whether it's from an economic development agency or who are your champions, let's get them involved. Let's make sure we're all talking about this. Let's get into the guts of the model if you need to and add more to it. But let's really get people prepared to do that. So that's the hope, is that there's some utility to be able to do that. That also is our ability to say, hey, we're in. Region 5 is in. I don't know if anybody is there from Region 5, but they will always hear me asking for money. That's okay. I'm sure you guys do it too. But legitimately, that's what made it happen in Region 4. Is the Region 5 as a convener, right? And the Region 5 offering some support. So I think that's what we're trying to get at is what's that right fit about way it can jump onto your existing resources, but also it can provide additional resources. And I think each state is going to be a little different, right, in that regard. So like I said, I really wanted to raise that point, but it's not done yet. We think it made sense in Region 4. How do you really help us make it sense in Region 5?
I like the framework and being able to discern the types of infrastructure that may be applicable to a community. And that's very good discussion, and being able to say, here's the program that best fits our community. And I think that tool can help them make that decision. And how do they implement it? Is it utility run function, or is it contracted out to a waste hauler to do the same type of actions?
Well, this is another place where we've looked at how can you improve or deal with it, is that at a state level, the way Michigan funds is different than the way Indiana funds is different than that. And so some of these line items are a little different. The way privates and the way contracts and the way brands and others invest, pretty similar, right, across all those areas. But some of the public availabilities for funds or even grant programs. So there is that possibility to meld this with some of those other activities and to have maybe some greater leverage. I think the other part that's challenging for people is we say out loud, you have to talk to elected officials. You have to talk to the senior decision makers because they approve the budget, because they set the policy, because they do all that. And I recognize in every state and every community, that's a much different discussion. We try to start from make sure you're well-versed financially and in all the impacts and all the benefits, so you can say what a good thing this is for the community and how we can afford to do it and how it's important to do it. So any other state want to jump in, or any other place folks want to go?
Yeah, this is John Woodman. I'm here in Montgomery County, Ohio, but also with the Association of Ohio Recyclers.
Great, thank you.
And I kind of want to echo what Dina said there. Really pushing this down to the local level, I think, is where we could kind of see our role as a state association, providing it to our solid waste district. And also, I'm also talking, I work for a solid waste district here in Montgomery County, a good sized one. And we have communities come to us regularly looking for this type of justification or analysis. And we've struggled with it. And I'm really excited to kind of dig into the actual spreadsheets and the tools and use that here, particularly for the communities that operate their own programs. I think we can really see a benefit there, and just kind of push it down to the local level like that. Kind of what I see.
Well, I was struck by the feds going, we can't do this, and the state's going, we can't do this. And I said, let's build a tool for the locals, right? And so I think it's intended to do that. Now, how do we distribute that out? I think the other piece there is the two big areas. We got one of them done through organics, but multifamily as a potential resource, and then also kind of medium-sized cities and college towns were the two other big ones that were identified. And my sense is the more utility this is going to have across the state is it's going to look like that. We went for such a kind of low population areas because they're everywhere, right? There's so many places that are like that. But the tool could probably improve, and it might have more utility in our region, because there are so many cities that are 20,000 to 50,000, right? That maybe have not such great recycling programs, or colleges or universities that are small cities. And I think that's a place that we might all say, let's make sure we add that module too, or do something, because that occurs to me that there's still a gap there. And if the region's looking to do something, hey, that could probably have utility as well. It's my sense.
I think that's a great comment. It's really hard to do quote unquote one size fits all kind of model, because they're demographics and regionally are just different.
Right.
Even in our county here, various communities operate differently. So you got to kind of customize it or tool it to their local needs. And I think that's to your point there.
Great. And any other state want to jump in, or anyone else from Ohio before we go on?
I was just going to ask, were these sent to us as attachments so we could play around with it, or is it strictly just in just test mode right now?
Yeah, they're not yet. They will be. And again, in terms of other activities, I'll say part of what we did with Region 4 is we did some kind of extra training on the model itself to get people engaged and invited some people. And then also we did a session where essentially we opened it. I think it was like 10 or 12 people that ended up, kind of self-selecting, but we opened up the guts of it, all of the, the 75 data points that it relies on and all this stuff to kind of really play with it, to do that. I think something like that is, very, very well something we could do. Based on the budget and the timing, we knew this model worked, and so it was pretty easy to tweak it, right? To make some Michigan assumptions, or statewide assumptions, and to make some, some other pieces and to fill it in. But that's a very wide open. I would expect in the next week or two, Matthew, that you'll see, something that you can look at more specifically. We will share something with, this stakeholder group before we make it final or public, right? So there'll be a chance to play with it more.
Okay.
It's just really a pretty simple model in some ways. So there's the ability to add more to it, and to customize it more, or to, again, how does that work with other things you're doing in the state that may be really available, and that'd be one of the things we want to pursue.
I'm with Illinois Recycling Foundation, and we just had a report presented July 1st to our legislature last year, basically calling for more support from the state for more recycling education. I loved your 6 elements of a successful program. That was wonderful. And I could see us doing exactly what John indicated, which would be to push this through to our communities. We certainly have a huge rural area. Many of them lack even recycling drop-offs in certain areas of the state. And then our densely populated area in the Chicago region, we quite regularly have transfer stations and landfills avoided by competitors, which makes it a little more dicey as far as that goes.
Right.
But
you saw we punted on that. We're like, nah, not going there yet.
Yeah, they will go out of their way.
That's
Yeah.
really not, and in many ways, like I say, even once you get to medium-sized cities, the utility, we could be more precise, I think, with multifamily and college town point of view, and I see real value in that. But go ahead, please.
I was going to say, we have a conference that we're planning the end of August, and if it's ready, it would be great, I think, for us to let city managers and purchasing managers, things like that are in school districts, all of those things, look at this, because they don't always have a very good understanding. And I love that was the beginning of the presentation, is trying to reach them where they're at, because they don't always understand where we're at when we're talking to them. So I don't know, that's just a thought.
Well, when we wrote the grant, so people understand, we essentially said, at a minimum, we're going to have private sectors, which we currently represent, but also represent, core private company, but also privates generally need to have a seat at the table. But there needs to be the state, whether it's commerce or DEQ or whatever that is. There needs to be recycling organization, right? An NGO recycling organization, and there needs to be economic development entities that are involved, whether those are regional or statewide. And so we kind of said that's where we need to start with all of these. And I said that's really how we conducted most of the market development work we did with the NRC, but building from there. And that's one of the charges of the grant, so people understand that, is how should the region cooperate? Do we do another CERTIC? Do we do, many people remember the old macro, the markets group for the Midwest? Do we redo macro 2.0? So these are things that have been kind of specifically talked about, and I think the region has an interest in understanding too. They're hoping to go through this process and go, what do you guys want to do? Should we convene? Should we do that? I mean, they've opened themselves up to those kinds of questions. So I think it's great that they were aware of this the whole time we were doing this in the region before. We've been trying to promote this for some time, so it's really awesome that they've funded it and let us keep going. So, but yeah, we want to see a role for all those entities. And again, if you folks have regional planners, if you have someone else in your state that, I know Indiana, the districts are really big. I know in Ohio, the districts are really big. In Minnesota, it's a little bit different. Wisconsin, each of them play out a little bit differently. But we're very open to who that representative has to be. It doesn't have to be the state person. It doesn't have to be, if it's cooperative extension, if it's KAB, whatever it is. We're very open to having the community broadly represented. We think it's essential. Isabella, are you getting bumped to go back yet, or discussion keep going? Is there other states on here that we could hear from, or anyone else who would like to jump in?
Hey, I snuck into your room without you noticing. I just want to check and see how y'all are doing. Is the conversation good? You need another few minutes? What's your feel? It's just been that good. You guys are awesome.
We went through a good round of feedback from folks, so it's either we're going to have to do a lot more, or I think we're pretty good. Does that sound about right to the group, or is it?
Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the main room, and then I'll broadcast that. I'll give the countdown to come back to the main room. We're going to do a quick debrief, and then we'll have some next steps for everyone. Sound good?
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, thank you. Anyone who has had a chance to speak at. Holly, anything that you've heard that you want people to know about the spreadsheets and that piece? Anything that you have questions about or want to hear feedback on?
I think I'm just waiting for whatever comes to people's minds. If they have ideas about something that's missing or some line item they want pulled out, that would be helpful. You know, I'm just waiting to hear from other people.
Yeah, I think some of that will come just getting in and using the model and seeing what kind of examples are there to match what a community would want to do. And I would expect that, you know, most of those cases are going to be covered in there once you get in and start using it. So yeah, look forward to it. Looks like you done a really good job on it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Was I right in that we have Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio? Any other states represented? I think they were going to try to divide by state, so must have took the Wisconsin. And I know I saw at least someone from Minnesota here, so I know we've got that part. Isabel, anything from your end? Any clarifications? You've got all your notes in place.
Yep, all good over here. Thanks for coming to this, guys. Good to hear from you.
And how do we go back to the main view? Or is she just calling us there? Oh, there we
Yeah, I
go.
think we're about to get pulled back.
60 seconds. Okay, great. The one thing I would encourage everyone to do is really think about, you know, again, get based on those 4 categories. Who else should we invite? Who else should be, you know, a part of this? Who represents those 300 people that we really want them to, you know, understand these elements and be able to train other people or educate people about that and to be a spokesperson in that way, to be an advocate to make the case for recycling. So I think that's going to be really important. And then as well as how does this fit with what you're doing or how you can help us push it locally are all things that we want to hear from you about. And Matthew, we will follow up directly on, I think we'll probably have a tech session where we'll just let you and Holly and Chris, our other developer, just kind of go through it, right? And I'm guessing there'll be a lot of interest in doing that. So.
That's great. Thanks. Well, we had some good discussion in our room. And I'm sure Marty is going to share what they've learned in their rooms. But, you know, I'll just share that, you know, we had some discussion around the way that each state has or is very different. I mean, there's really different assumptions that need to be made for each state. And I believe this model includes some of those assumptions, but our group went a little bit deeper and we took some notes to check on some of those assumptions. We also talked about the fact that this model could be even more finely adapted to each state. You know, if the state is willing to put some funding into expanding this model or enhancing this model for state specific kind of purposes to make it easier, to make those underlying assumptions more clear and numerous, you know, that can be available there as well. Tracy Pernage really brought up an interesting question is, you know, when are we going to move on from just seasonal organics collection? You know, when can we start talking about how that gets provided in a more year-round kind of way, because that is, you know, food waste is generated year-round, but we've got a little ways to go to get there. If anybody wants to pipe up and add anything from our conversation, you're welcome to do that. Steve, do you have anything that you want to add from that discussion?
You know, I just think we need to go through the instructions, make sure that, you know, if there are things that are, you know, pretty divergent for a particular state, that we include those in the instructions, you know, as people are working through this. You know, Wisconsin with their required material list is the one that came up. And, that's one that if you're in Wisconsin, you're planning a program, you really can't take glass out. And we just need to make that clear in some of the instructions there. So it limits the options.
Karen, can we talk like just for 30 more seconds about the year-round organics potential?
Sure.
For that? I guess I feel like, at least in Michigan, we don't have a lot of that happening, but we do have some of it. And as as part of our recycling infrastructure grants, we are funding some of that either as permanent programs or as pilot programs. So I guess in my thinking, I feel like if it's not something that we see like in this tool, that I guess it's just an opportunity to be a little bit more forward thinking, right? And to see that as an opportunity when communities are looking at and using this tool, that they see that as like, oh, that's the next step for us, right?
Yes.
So, so that's all. So.
Yep. Agreed. We do want to forge the path for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Yep.
Well, Karen, if I could, fine tuning that compost piece is one that, or that organics one is one that I think is going to require that, because again, remembering who the client is. I'll say one of my debriefs was great, is that all of my state members said, we can't do this. We need to deliver this to the locals. And I was like, right, that's exactly what Region 4 said, is that we need to really get this, into the, into the local levels. The other modules that they were looking at, again, back to that small city and maybe the multifamily are ones that have been identified previously. And when we look at that clientele, that's not the big cities, not the high performers. It's all those folks who have no programs at all, who are likely to start with a drop off or curbside, not with a full scale organics program, et cetera. So the organics one, I think, is new, it's different. And to your point, Tracy, what's going to be the highest utility around that one? And I think that's open to where that needs to go. Maybe that needs to be less focused on small communities and more focused on, that cadre of people who are likely to want to adapt it. I think we're very open, to all those pieces. The other piece I'll just, again, concur, Karen, is this: how do we localize it? And how do we, recognize that that's there? I think for the base model, we've done that in terms of being statewide, but you identified the data components that can also be adjusted. But part of the Region 4 process was, boy, there's a lot of work that can be done state by state to support the budget component, which says, what are my funding mechanisms? I use a DPW district. I have they have these different districts. I have a different thing. I have a plan in Wisconsin. And so there's a lot of elements that it's maybe not the tool that should not be overused, right? It's directional, et cetera. It's not it, but there's other ways to make sure that when we're training folks up on how to be financially, competent and really arguing for the programs, make sure they know what their state, workarounds are, what their state grant programs are, et cetera. So there's places to improve it in other areas too that might answer the same question in terms of its utility. I just really encourage people to give us any feedback like that, Karen, but I will say we should pretty much assume that we are going to have a technical session. I think there's enough people who want to just, hey, Holly, you're going to spend an hour, we're going to walk through it and do that. And so I don't know that we need to do that with this whole group, but certainly we could get a group that's self-selected and make sure that we offer that to folks, sooner than later. And if the compost discussion is a part of that, that's probably okay too.
Marty, do you want to talk?
I was just going to say, would it be all right if Holly just walks through that drop down to show what the variations in the organics programs are? I think that was the bulk of the questions in our group is what are the options that are being considered?
So the options that are considered are the type of compost technology, whether it's windrow or aerated static pile, and then whether or not you're processing yard waste only or yard waste as well as food waste. Those are pretty much the only options. Everything else is set with the collection being seasonal 8 months out of the year. Are there more options that you're thinking would be useful?
Well, the question was, so with food waste, obviously you switch to a 12-month calendar instead of an 8-month calendar. And your volumes just align to those months?
So it's still seasonal.
Okay.
It's
so
still
this is
seasonal, even if it
all-
is food waste included.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, we'll have to talk about that in the future as we work together as a team. Marty, did you have any findings or debrief from the work in your group? What was your discussion about?
I really, like I said, I really think it really just mimicked a lot of what you had to say. You know, the first feedback was, this is really great. It's really on point. That's a lot of our issues. How do we get the locals to use it? Right. And should we beef some of those up? This notion of, I really believe this will be true, is that the small city university multifamily, that's going to be a question for a lot of people, and I think will really improve the utility of the tool altogether. And it's got that for a lot of regions that are maybe not super rural like the South is, but are pretty rural, but have small cities. So that came up. And then again, there's these notions about we're all local. How do we beef up the understanding, maybe not just with the tool, but also with those other understandings that are available through the budget and all that. And then I think the other piece that we talked about a little bit was, very explicit, this is SROs, the recycling organizations is the state, this is economic development entities, this is privates, and that when you're thinking about who to invite, who to include, how to deliver this, through your state, make sure you're including all those folks and sharing that information back with us. So I think that's the kind of the quick summation. And again, I'd offer anyone else in our group to speak up. We heard from Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois.
That's great. I think we're getting really close to kind of wrapping this session up. We're going to give you back some time today. So, we're still kind of, developing these ideas, or how we're going to bring more people into the fold over the next, couple months. But our intention is to hold another session very much like this, where we talk a little bit more, get a little bit further down the road in some of the questions that you all brought up. But what we really need is for you all to, identify other kind of recycling leaders in your state, not just state level leaders, but local and regional leaders that really understand and could easily see the value of this tool, to come to the session in June to learn about this tool, so that they can also attract people to the training that we're planning in September. So we really want to build the momentum for this training in September, where we're ready to hand off this tool for people to actually use and apply. Part of that training is going to be like, maybe about how you're making a presentation, at least providing examples as to how others have done that. So what I encourage you to do, a couple of things I encourage you to do is, once you get those invitations from us, you'll probably get an invite to register for the June. Please share that with those people you think may be helpful. And then I also encourage you to speak with your state level leaders to explore ways that your state can support the dissemination and use of this tool. If there's a value in you using this tool or clarifying this tool, making it more specific to your state, that's something that you can certainly talk about with RRS, but how can you use this in your state? In Michigan, we have a unique relationship with our state agency, the Michigan Recycling Coalition. We are the state recycling organization. We have unique relationship with all of these people, and part of the ways I intend to use it is engaging people on the ground and introducing this tool to them specifically, maybe even walking through this tool with whatever numbers and information they have, to help them figure out where they sit in this logistical system of service provision, and help them find their way using this tool. So we hope that you'll join us in June and again in September for the big system. And I guess I'll ask Marty if he's got anything to add before we let you all go. And thank you for being here today.
I think I'm great. I think
That's great.
it was good to see everybody. And I would just add that we'll be reaching out in terms of some technical feedback, and it might be a different group that you think of, because we want all your techie people that, you know your data, know your spreadsheets, and want to talk to our people who know the same. But that'll be part of the follow-up. But thanks again to everyone, and really great participation in my group at least. So I thank you for that as well.
Thank you. Thursday, tomorrow is Friday.
Good day, everyone.
Bye.